Luke chapter 5, verse number 4, Jesus has just finished performing all these miracles for these people, and they don't want him to leave. And I think like we can all understand this, right? Like if Jesus is there and he's doing all this stuff in your life, you kind of want him to stay there and to continue to do a bunch of stuff for you, right? Like this is the thing. So they're trying to get him to stay there, and Jesus says, no. I got to go because I got to go spread the gospel around, right? This is what we do in church so often is we kind of try to keep Jesus to ourselves instead of doing what he said to do, which is to go out, right, and spread his message to others around. So Jesus is like, I can't stay here. It's been real. It's been good. I've got to leave here. I've got to go somewhere else to continue to spread the word. And he goes to Lake Gennesaret. And when he's there, he's speaking to the people, but nobody can really hear him because so many people showed up. And so Jesus goes over to Simon, also known as Peter, and he goes over to him and he says, hey, listen, I need to borrow your boat, and I need you to take the boat out deep into the water, like take it out there so that they can hear me. I can reach more people with my voice. And so he gets in the boat with Peter and he goes out and he shares the gospel. And at the end of it, that's where we're going to pick up in verse number 4. It says, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. And Simon answered, because we're always so quick with our excuse, right? We talked about this a few weeks ago, the first week of this series, but I like my excuses. Anybody been working on your excuses? Somebody has an excuse of why they haven't been working on their excuses. But he immediately comes to him with an excuse and he says, hey, listen, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets. That phrase, because you say so, that's like the reverse of what we all heard as kids growing up with parents. Like, why do I have to do this? Because I said so. Here, Peter's like, because you said so, I will let down the nets. And when they had done so, verse 6, I love that. When they had done so. See, a lot of us are waiting for God to do something in our lives before we do what he told us to do. We're waiting for him to show up. It does not say that God did it and then they did it. It says, when they had done what Jesus told them to do, then they saw it. When did they see what Jesus said? When they had done so. Some of us need to do so. We need to stop complaining about why it's not happening. We need to stop giving excuses of why it's not happening. And we need to do what we've been told to do. It says, after they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats to the full, that they began to sink. And when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man. For he and his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken, and so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people. Simon and his team had fished all night long, and they had caught absolutely nothing. Like, I want you to realize this. Like, they've been doing this all night, and they had caught nothing. And then Jesus rolls on into town, speaks to everybody, and then says, hey, I want you to go back out, and I want you to catch some fish again. I want you to load the boat back up. I want you to go out deeper, and I want you to try to catch some fish. Now, this seems like it's not a big deal on the surface. All of us, we're like, oh, it's Sunday morning. We would, of course, do what Jesus told us to do. No problem. But you got to realize, this was their livelihood. So let me put it to you in 2023, okay? This would be like you go to work tomorrow. You work all day long. You get paid $0. And then somebody shows up, like you're packing up, right? Like you're headed home. Your shift is over. And you're headed home, and somebody shows up and says, hey, go back to work. Would you do that? Don't lie, we're in church. Absolutely not. You would not do that. So they've done this all night. Jesus shows up, he's like, hey, it didn't work, but go do it again. And this is where many of us, I feel like, are at in our lives, and this is why we struggle with peace, is because we've been doing something for so long, and we feel like we're not seeing any progress. It's all we know to do. It's what God has told us to do. It is our calling, and we've been doing it, but we've seen no progress. And so we're struggling with continuing to do what we know God has told us to do. Because when you don't see the fruit of it, it's a little bit difficult to continue to go forward. Nothing's been happening, nothing has been changing, and it becomes frustrating. And in those moments, it is hard for us to maintain consistency. It is hard for us to keep showing up. It's hard for us to read our Bible, to do what's in the Bible, not see what God did for somebody in the Bible when they did what happened in the Bible that we just did. It's difficult. It's difficult to come to church on Sunday morning and to go to work on Monday and your boss is the same boss you left on Friday. It's difficult to come to church on Sunday and to read the word and to pray and then to see that what you prayed for did not happen. It's difficult to constantly be doing things that we feel like, okay, this is what God wants me to do, but then to feel like he hasn't shown up the way that we thought he would show up. And it's easy in those moments to wonder like why we failed, why it's not working, why it's not happening. But if Simon would have quit and gone home, then he never would have experienced the miracle that Jesus brought forth. If he would have been like, no, listen, Jesus, I've already done it all night long and it didn't work, I'm going home. He would not have experienced what Jesus did in that moment. And for many of us, our lack of peace comes from our lack of consistency. Many of us have become so inconsistent in our faith, in our walk with God. We're living for God when we're at church on Sunday, but don't catch us on Friday night. I didn't say Saturday night. Y'all good for last night? It's okay. We pray when things are going well. We worship, hands raised, everything. Woo, God is good when life is good. But then when it's a down day, we're just like, move me if you can, God. And for many of us, we're here today, we're there tomorrow. We try today, we quit tomorrow. And God says, as long as you're inconsistent, you're not going to be able to experience the peace that surpasses all understanding. Because his peace does not come from you just conquering your attitude today. It comes from you conquering again tomorrow and the next day. It doesn't come from you conquering your temper today. It comes from you reeling that temper in tomorrow and the next day. It doesn't come from you just praying today. It comes from consistency. So for this week of Peace of Mind, I want to talk to you on the subject, the turmoil of inconsistency. The turmoil of inconsistency. Let's pray. God, I thank you for today. Thank you for your word. Thank you for who you are. Pray, Lord, that this morning you would help us to hear from you, that you would speak to our hearts, that we would apply what you have to say. Help nobody to leave the same way that they came in. Help nobody to hear or see from me today, but to hear and see from you. I thank you for it in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. Now, how many of you, by show of hands, how many of you have, like, you're one of multiple children in your family? Anybody show hands? Okay. All right. How many of you are only children? Show of hands. All right. That's my people right there because that's me. Okay. Only child, by blood anyways, an only child. And so I never really understood the intricacies of the drama of having siblings 24/7. Right? I never experienced this. I never knew what it was like to have somebody else that you're trying to vie with attention for. You're trying to share things, right? And like, now I have 3 boys. And 2 of them are old enough to where most days I live my life saying, why? Right? Like, why? Like, why are they able to get along in this moment and be best friends, talking about, you're my best friend. So sweet, it's cute, it's amazing. And then sitting on each other's head until they cry the next morning. I don't understand. And I'm just like, I think at this point, I used to want siblings. I think at this point, I'm glad I played basketball by myself growing up. Right? Like that, I just threw it to myself. Like, Because the drama of it, I'm a dramatic enough person as it is. I don't need, the extra. So I just see, like how they just go back and forth, and I don't understand it because I never experienced it. But now that I've seen it, I know that I didn't want it. And so I watch as this happens, and they love to pick on each other. And Elijah, the 4-year-old, right, he loves to pick on his older brother, Judah, who actually turns 6 tomorrow, which is crazy to me. So he loves to pick on the older brother, and Elijah's favorite movie is called The Grinch, okay? Like, that is one of his favorite movies. Now, I'm not talking about favorite Christmas movie. I'm talking about, like, favorite movie, right? Because Christmas is in our veins here in the Barker household. Like, we love us some Christmas. So we watch The Grinch year-round. And the real-life Grinch with Jim Carrey, Judah likes it too, but there's some parts in it that scare him a little bit, right? And so that Elijah can watch the movie and not scare Judah, right? Like, so we can actually watch it, we just tell Judah, hey, close your eyes. Right? You ever done this before? Like, just close your eyes. Like, it's going to be okay. And so a few months ago, we're watching The Grinch, and it gets to the part where they're at the post office, and the Grinch jumps out of the girl, and that's the part that scares Judah. So, Elijah's like, close your eyes, Judah, close your eyes, And so Judah closes his eyes, and then Judah made the mistake of asking Elijah if the scary part was over yet. And Elijah starts giggling and says, yeah, it's over, Judah. Judah, the scary part's over. And Judah, opens his eyes, and it's right as he does, the Grinch jumps at the girl, and Judah's like, ah, and starts crying. And I'm like, bro, it's a movie. Elijah, why? Like, what is happening? And so we get Judah calm down. And then another week later, we're watching The Grinch, and Elijah, who laughed while his brother cried, by the way, decides he wants to do it again. And so we're watching The Grinch. It gets to the scary part, and Elijah says, the scary part's over, Judah. But Judah's smart because he's 6. And he looks at me, and he's like, Daddy, is the scary part really over? And I said, it's not over yet. It's not over yet. I know what Elijah said. It's not over yet. And Judah says, but Elijah said it's over yet. This is what I don't understand. We don't learn our lesson. When you do what Elijah tells you to do, what happens? Bad things. Bad things happen, not good things. When you do what Daddy tells you to do, what happens? Good things, right? So I don't care what Elijah said. It's not over yet. And I just told you, I was like, it's not over yet. It's not over yet. And he listened, and all was well, and we had no tears, and God was good. But I told him, I said, it's not over yet. And this is, for many of us in our lives, we quit because we feel like it's over. We feel like what we've been believing for, we feel like what God said, we feel like where we've been living, we feel like it is over, like the circumstance is over, like what we've been hoping for is over. And God said, it's not over yet. He showed up to Peter. Peter thought that fishing for the day was over. He thought it was finished. They had packed up. They were done. And Jesus shows up and he says, hey, it's not over yet. And if you're taking notes today, the first thing I want you to write down is it's not over yet. On the inside of your welcome packet, there's a note card there for you to take notes on. But he said, it's not over yet. He gave him this weird instruction here in verse number 4. He says, put out into the deep water and let the nets down for a catch. Put out into the deep water and let the nets down for a catch. You're like, why is that a weird instruction? Because they had done that already. They had already tried it, and it did not work. He's telling them to go out and to drop their nets. They had been fishing all night long, and they had caught nothing. Nothing. And now Jesus shows up, and he tells them to go do what anybody else would have known made no sense. Anybody else would have known, this makes no sense for you to go back out and do this for 2 reasons. First of all, they had already tried and failed. But also, because it's daytime now. And the best fishing happens at nighttime. That's why they had fished all night long. So the timing was off. But when Jesus gives an instruction, it does not have to be when or how you think it should be. It doesn't have to be in the moment that you think it should be. Peter was about to go home. He had given up hope of catching anything. He was like, I've been trying this. And in Peter's mind, the time for fishing was over. He was done. he was finished. He had quit. He had tried and he had failed. But the moment that he felt like he had failed and the moment that he wanted to quit is the exact moment that Jesus showed up and told him, I want you to go and I want you to do it again. The exact moment Peter's like, there's no fish. I've already failed. I need to quit. I want to go home. I'm tired. Is the moment that Jesus showed up and said, hey, I want you to go out and I want you to do it again. And some of us, we quit some things in 2015. We quit some things in 2019, 2020, 2022. We quit some things that God is wanting to do in 2023 and 2024 and beyond. And he's coming in and he's saying, listen, it's not over yet. Be consistent. It's not over yet. Be consistent. You once prayed and believed that God could heal your body. It's not over yet. Be consistent. You once prayed and believed that God could grow your business. It's not over yet. Be consistent. You once prayed and believed that God could send you a spouse. It's not over yet. Be consistent. Be consistent. But so many of us, we start out on this journey of faith, and then the moment something happens contrary to what we thought should happen, we quit or we give up. And we wonder why we're so peaceful in the things of the Lord this day, but so crazy stressed out the next day. It's because we trusted him in this moment, but the moment that it didn't work out the way we wanted it to, we turned and went a different direction, and now we're sitting here on this boat like rocking, stressed out of turmoil because we've become inconsistent. See, the Lord is the same yesterday, today, and forever, but many of us are inconsistent. And we blame God for not doing what he said he would do. And he's like, I'm doing exactly what I said I would do. You're just not doing what I told you to do. You did it once, you did it twice, and then you quit. And you've given up when it's not over yet. The moment that you want to give up is the moment that you need to be consistent and do it again, because it's not over yet. Somebody say, it's not over yet. It's not over yet. Stop telling God why it won't work. You think that he doesn't know you already tried and failed. You think he doesn't know that you already went out on your own and you tried to handle this situation and it didn't work out. Of course he does. Many of us, like, we tried and we're like, God, I would love to believe that you're going to send me a spouse, but now I've lost more hair, I've lost my six-pack, and I've lost any chance of anybody being interested. Right? We're like, I would love to believe it, but God, this is the reason I can't. I would love to still believe that my family can be restored, but I've been trying for years to heal the pain that I brought to them, but it's not working. And I feel like might as well just give up. God's like, no. You need to be consistent. It's like I tried to tell somebody about Jesus. About 5 years ago, I tried to share the gospel with somebody, but they rejected it. So now I'm just done telling people. He's like, no. You need to be consistent. It's not about what you do once. It's not about what you do twice. It's not about what you do 3 times. It's about what you do 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 times. It's about the consistency. It's about always saying, hey, God, I'm going to do what you told me to do no matter what it looks like. I'm going to do what you told me to do no matter the results that I've experienced. I'm going to do what you've told me to do no matter how it feels. See, Jesus never asked Peter, hey, have you tried fishing yet? He didn't ask him that. He didn't even come to Peter and say, hey, man, did you catch any fish when y'all went fishing? No, Jesus just came to Peter with an instruction because Jesus does not care about the reasons that it can't work. He just wants you to know that he'll make it work. So he came to Peter with an instruction. He's like, he didn't ask, have you failed? He didn't ask, did it not work out? He didn't ask, how many fish have you caught today, Peter? Boo-boo. He just said, listen, I want you to launch out into the deep. In other words, Jesus wanted him to know it's not about what has already happened. It's about what I'm about to do. It doesn't matter about what happened last night, Peter. It's about what I'm going to do in this moment. And he came to him with an instruction. And maybe you're here today and you feel like you've been seeking God. You've been wanting God to do something in your life. But now you feel like nothing has happened, nothing has changed, and you're kind of like, maybe I didn't pray hard enough. Maybe I didn't pray long enough. Maybe I didn't pray maybe I need to do a 1 foot, stand on 1 foot, right, get my back. Maybe I need to try some things. Maybe I just need to quit. Maybe I just don't need to pray anymore. Maybe I just don't need to believe God's going to do anything anymore. And God's like, no, you continue to pray. You continue to believe. You are consistent in what you are doing as long as you're doing what he said to do. See, a lot of us, we're consistent in the wrong things. But if we're doing what God has told us to do, he's saying, be consistent in what I have told you to do and continue to pray. And don't go to God and tell him when he tells you, hey, you need to pray about this. Don't be like, well, I already prayed. No, you be consistent and do it again. Tell somebody, be consistent. You got to be consistent. And then Jesus told Peter, he said, do it again. And then look at what Simon said in verse number 5. He said, Master, we've worked hard all night long and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets. Next thing I want you to write down is do it without understanding. Do it without understanding. Peter had been fishing all night long. He had caught absolutely nothing. And all he wanted to do is to go home. The last thing he wants to do is to try again. Isn't it sometimes it's kind of sometimes embarrassing, right? When you feel like you've already done something and it didn't work out, and then God's like, I want you to do it again. It's like, seriously? Really? Again? We've been through this. The last thing he wanted to do was to try again. And many of us today, we are so tired. We're tired. We're tired of trying and failing. We're tired of getting our hopes up only to be let down. We're tired of not seeing what we believe God said he was going to do. And I get it. I promise you I do. I'm not saying that it's easy to try again. I'm not saying that you'll want to try again. I just want you to realize today that if Peter would have gone home, he would not have seen what Jesus did. It's not easy. It's not fun. It's that old adage, if it was fun, everybody would do it. If it was easy, everybody would do it. It's not easy. It's not fun. But if Peter would have gone home, he would not have seen what Jesus did. He would not have experienced what Jesus did. And so many of us, we get so close, and then we quit when it gets too difficult. We get so close, and then we stop when it's not as easy as we wanted it to be. We get so close to the relationship being healed until there's just one little thing they say, and boom, that's it. Gloves coming off. I've been nice for 5 years. It took 1 second for you to ruin 5 years. Good job. All it takes, we get so close. And then one little thing comes in, and we're just like, boop. God says, I want you to be consistent when it's easy, when it's not. When you feel it, when you don't. Be consistent. Jesus comes and he gives them an instruction. He gives them a task, and it is not an easy task. It is not an easy task. And many times in our lives, we're tired, and that's okay. And then we go to God and we say, God, can you please do this? Can you please help me, God? And by help, we mean, God, can you do all of it? But Jesus comes to him and he says, I want you to launch out into the deep and let down the nets. I want you to do it. Now, this boat does not have a motor, okay? This is not it's like, okay, cool, just start the engine, let's go out into the deep. It required work. It was not easy. It was not simple. It was something that took a lot. And sometimes we get an attitude because God doesn't do it the way we want him to. He doesn't do it in the time frame we want him to. So we get an attitude with God. And we're like, well, I guess God's not going to do it. And God's like, not until you do what you're supposed to. But we get an attitude with God because we're like, God, why are you not doing what you said you would do? In the time frame, why are you not doing it on my schedule? Why I always got to be lined up with your schedule, God? Why aren't you doing it the way I want you to do it? Why aren't you doing it at the time I want you to do it? Not only did I want to get the promotion, I wanted that person fired. And now, they're working for me. And I can't fire them. Like, I want you to do it my way. And we get so frustrated. But you know what I realized a few days ago? God really dealt with me on this because I was praying. We're wanting to buy this entire building, like the whole thing and the parking lot and everything. And it's a super impossible, which is why I know God's going to do it. And so we're praying, and I was getting frustrated because I'm like, God, I've heard the stories, right, about people, like they walked around the building, a couple times they did a whole Jericho march, and then like people were like, here, we don't want the building anymore. Can we get that? Instead, they're like, hey, no, it's going to cost you $2.25 million, $2.5 million, like something, it's going to cost money. And so we're like, well, what do you do when you don't have that? And so God, like, can we do the Jericho thing? And I'm all frustrated, right? And God dealt with me on it because he's like, isn't it scary to think about where you would be if everything worked out the way that you wanted it to work out? Isn't it kind of alarming to think when you look back over your life, all the things you got so mad with God at? God, why was it not this way? God, I'm going to meet my person in middle school. We're going to date in middle school. We're going to get engaged senior year, graduation. It's going to be the bomb. We're 18. God, I'm going to start my business. I'm going to be a Fortune 500 in 1 year as a 25-year-old. God, my family, like, it's going to be like the best family ever. People are going to want to be us. Instead, we go into like Golden Corral, and everybody in Golden Corral's like, don't be like that, kids, It's like we get so mad at God over these things that we wanted that did not happen the way that we wanted. But if you look back over your life, honestly, if you'll look back over your life, you will see that the greatest things that have happened in your life happened because God didn't do it the way that you wanted him to. The best things that God does happens when he does not do it the way that he wants us to. I'm talking relationships. I'm talking jobs. I'm talking about where we live. I'm talking about our environment. The best things that God does happens when he doesn't do it the way that we want him to. In our individual lives and, hey, even at church. Even at church. I was talking to somebody, and this is going to ruffle some feathers, but it's okay. I really don't, it's all good. So I was talking to somebody the other day, a few months ago, actually. And they're not here today, so it's okay. So don't be looking at your neighbor like, was it you? No, they're not here. And I was talking to them, and they said, Pastor Dustin, like, I just really wish. Anytime somebody starts out something like that, I'm just like, oh, Lord Jesus. Pastor Dustin, I just really wish, like, that we had a midweek service. And I looked at him, and I said, man, we have 5. And they looked at me and they were like, what? I said, they're called Elevate groups. And they happen in the middle of the week. It's like midweek services. We have 5 of them. But see, most of the time, we have in our mind how we think something needs to be or what we want something to be. And God has the way that he wants to do it. See, he called Elevation Point Church, he told us very specifically to be about connecting people to God and, I love when y'all love the vision statement. Y'all know it. Good. Connect people to God and others. And Elevate groups are a perfect opportunity for that. So I'm like, we do have midweek services. It's called Elevate groups. And this is the way that God has called us to have midweek service. Many of us in our lives, we have things going on. And we're like, God, I wanted it to be like this. And God's like, that's cool. And I'm doing what you're looking for, but I'm doing it in a different way. I'm showing up the way you want me to, but I'm showing up in a different way because, see, your personality type cannot handle what I did for them. Your personality type, I know you. If I just let you win the lottery, it'd be gone tomorrow. God's like, I need you to to put in some work. I need you to launch into the deep. I need you to have some midnight hours where you feel like you're burning on both ends of the candle, trying to get some things done so you have some skin in the game, so that once you get to the place where I'm taking you, you can say, hey, listen, I'm not squandering this. I worked too hard for this. I did too much for this. God says, listen, it's different for all of us. But we all get so busy at having in our mind the way we want God to do it. And the moment he doesn't do it the way we want him to, we quit. We stop. We're like, I'm done. I'm finished. I'm over. And I'm not going any further. And God's like, no. I'm still doing it, but it's different. And many of us are missing the growth and the increase and the blessing and the peace that God has for us because we are wanting to do things in our own way. And when it doesn't happen, we quit. And we stop. And God says, it's okay to get a little frustrated. It's okay to not understand. It's okay to not be able to figure out. Like, you ever had a moment like, God, what are you doing here? Like, you ever had a moment like that? Like, God, I don't know what you're doing. I'm trusting you. But, like, what is going on? Like, what is happening? God says, you don't have to understand. You just need to obey. You don't have to understand. You just need to be consistent. Jesus told him, he said, I know that you fished all night. I want you to draw out into the deep. I want you to be consistent. You've been doing it all night. It did not work. I want you to be consistent. When we had closed down in 2020 for COVID, when we opened back up about 6 months later, I will never forget this as long as I live. Because I had been talking to a camera screen like that was it, right? Like that was for like 6 months. And I was like, God, please bring people into the building. Like, I'm an introvert, but I don't want to be alone. You know what I'm saying? And so we opened back up, and I remember, like, our first Sunday back, we did registration. Because we're like, we need to know how many people, you know. We may need 2 services, may need 3, because we had just moved into this building 6 months before COVID hit. And we were like blowing and going, you know what I mean? Like, we were going to 2 services that Easter, and then COVID hit. And so I'm like, hey, we may need 3 services. Like, you know, you don't know what God's going to do. We got to have registration. And 3 people registered to come to church. And I was like, it's okay. Been preaching to a camera. Could preach to 3 people. It's amazing. 10 people showed up to church that Sunday. That was amazing, because when you ask people to register, they don't do it, right? So 10 people showed up, and it was awesome. And I was like, okay, this is a good start. I thought we were going to have 3 services. This is good, you know, because we had everybody spread out and all that jazz. So I'm like, you know, okay, it's okay. I was like, but next Sunday, right, because the people, they just want to see what happens, right? They want to see, hey, what happens to the people that actually test this out, you know, they show up to church. Next week, we had 8 people. I'm like, yo, what happened? We going backwards? This is the wrong way. Next week, we had 18 people, and I I was like, I don't dance, but I did. And so it was awesome. But I thought for sure at the end of a month, we're going to be back like, yes. And then a year later, 2021, I'm like, oh, okay. January 2021, it's going to click. It's going to hit. Maybe 30 people, 40 people. We had gone from hundreds down to this. And I remember I just said, you know what, God? I got to a place I said, God, I'm actually thankful for this season. Because it's not about the numbers. It's about your message going forth. I preach to a screen, preach to a camera. I'll preach to 1 person, 2 people, anybody that wants to. And we just continued and continued. And then we got to a point where now in 2023, we've surpassed where we were before. My point is this. There were some moments, and I'm fully transparent and honest, that I was like, is church, like, should I do something different? Like, maybe we should try something different. But the whole time God was like, no, just keep showing up. Just keep showing up. And for many of us, we've gotten to places where we're like, maybe God doesn't want me to do this. And he's like, no, you need to keep showing up. You need to keep doing it. It's not about the thing you're doing. God says, listen, I just want you to obey and leave the results up to me. I want you to obey me and leave the results up to me. I want you to keep showing up. When you don't understand it, I want you to keep showing up. When you can't figure it out, I want you to keep showing up. He told Peter, he said, listen, I know you fished all night and you had nothing to show for it, but keep showing up and launch out into the deep. And when he did, look at verse number 6. It says, when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. Last thing I want you to write down, and we'll get you out of here, is prepare for it. Prepare for it. Many of us do not prepare for it because we're too inconsistent to see it and we know it's not going to happen. Prepare for it. It said, when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. The fact that their nets began to break lets us know that they were not prepared for what Jesus did in that moment. They were prepared for less when Jesus wanted to bring more. And many of us have lowered our expectation to a lower level because it's all that we've ever experienced. And he says, no, I want you to raise your expectation and I want you to prepare for what I am going to do through your Is mine dead? Oh! Has it been dead the whole time? 2 minutes, all right. Sorry to the people online, 2 minutes, you didn't, it's okay. So they used to take me to New York and I'd be like, hey, what's going on, you know? And it'd be amazing. And then they stopped taking me. But I remember when I was a kid and I would go with them, man, this microphone is so much better. When I was a kid and I'd go with them, I would only take a backpack because we'd only stay 2 days, right? Because it's New York, right? Like, unless you have family there, you ain't trying to stay overnight and pay $5,000 a night, whatever it is, I don't know. Have you, So, I would take a backpack, and they would bring 3 suitcases to check, okay? One for each of them, and then I'm looking at the third suitcase. I'm like, y'all told me I couldn't bring a suitcase. You told me to put my stuff in a backpack. And they said, yeah, we need the third suitcase to be empty because we're going shopping in New York, and we need the suitcase. All y'all nod y'all's heads because you know, we need the third suitcase to bring everything back in. But I got to looking at the suitcases, and I'm like, little suitcase, big suitcase. And the biggest suitcase was the empty suitcase. And so I asked Mom, I was like, Mom, why is the biggest suitcase the empty suitcase? And she said, because I'm planning to bring back more than I left with. I'm planning to bring back more than I left with. And I wonder if there's anybody, they were prepared. And I wonder if there's anybody who is prepared for what God is wanting to do, who would say, hey, I'm bringing more into my future than I left with in my past. I'm preparing for what God is going to do in my future. I'm going to prepare for what he's about to do. Because even though it didn't work when I did it on my own, even though I may have failed when I did it on my own. See, Peter had failed. He had messed up. It didn't work. But he said, you know what? I never would have seen what Jesus could do if I would have done it on my own. I'm not losing my peace because it didn't work. I'm not quitting because it didn't work. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to keep showing up. I'm preparing for what only he can do. I wonder if there's anybody who's like, you know what? I'm going to prepare for my family to be restored. I'm going to prepare for things to get right on my job. I'm going to prepare for my mental state to get healed. I'm going to prepare for my body to be healed. I'm going to prepare for God to show up in the lives of my children. I'm going to prepare for my whole family to come to Christ. I'm going to prepare for it. And even if I don't see it tomorrow, I'm going to keep preparing for it. And even if I don't see it next week, I'm going to keep preparing for it. And even if I don't see it in a month, I'm going to keep preparing for it. If I get all the way to 2024 and I haven't seen it yet, I'm going to keep preparing for it. Because I refuse to be inconsistent. God, no matter what it looks like, feels like, seems like, I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to be consistent. Because inconsistency brings turmoil. And consistency does not make everything perfect right away. But if you will be consistent in what God has led you to and what he is leading you to and what he has said to you, then you begin to see, I'm not fighting this battle on my own. And when I'm tired and when I'm depleted and when I just want to pack it up and go home, I'm going to be consistent because I know that in that moment, Jesus always shows up. And when he shows up, it's better than it ever could have been if I'd have done it on my own.